A 19-year-old learner from Forest High School in Turffontein appeared in court after he allegedly stabbed and killed a fellow learner. He also stabbed 2 other pupils. The motive for the fight is yet to be known. However, Education MEC Panyaza Lesufi says it is suspected to be gang-related. The suspect appeared at the Johannesburg Magistrate court on charges of murder and attempted murder. Earlier, a fight broke out between rival gangs at the court. Police had their hands full as they tried to make sure that the groups didn't pose a security risk to the rest of the people in the court building. The situation is now said to be under control. According to our reporter at the scene, 2 suspects have since been arrested. Well, for more on this story, I'm joined in studio by Gauteng Education spokesperson Steve Mabona and Moleboheng Rapetswa. She's from the STRU movement. That's an organization that deals with social ills in our communities. Thank you very much, both of you, for joining us.
Thank you.
Let's start with you, Steve. Of course, we've just had an outline of what happened with this case. Do we know if the pupil who was killed at the Forest School was killed by a fellow pupil at the school?
Yes, we can confirm that is a fellow pupil. Actually, the deceased was not supposed to be at school on the day because they were not writing. It's only your grade 11 and 10 that were supposed to be at school. According to our information at our disposal is that the perpetrator was then accosted outside the school. That's where this incident occurred, outside, and unfortunately he then stabbed the 3 of fellow learners, and this one succumbed to the injuries, and he died on the scene.
Look, it's a very tragic end indeed, but was the department aware that there is some sort of gangsterism taking place at this particular school?
No, well, when we interacted with the principal, there was no indication that there's gangs that are operating in the school, because for that to happen, or want to know, incidences must happen around the school. So it means that there were some probably incidences that are happening outside the school, because according to what we were told is that there was a fight actually last week Friday, which ended up one learner suffered some injuries, and they decided that they would go to school and probably continue with this. So that school has not had incidences for quite many years, and hence we were actually shocked that there are gangs that are operating in the school.
Yes. Moleboheng, earlier we understand at the court these youngsters were brazen enough to have fights at the court for whatever reason, as the suspect was going through his hearing. What's the root cause of all this stuff that's going on? You're from the STRU movement, which basically looks at our social ills. What is the core?
It's actually interesting that you asked me that in particular. Our understanding or how we read this situation is that it's children, really, it's an outcry by children, and I'm more concerned with Mr. Mabona's response on that they were not entirely aware of what the situation is. We live in these communities, we know them, and round about now as South Africa, we should be able to profile our situation and where our children are, our learners. In this case, particularly our 18 and unders, the situations, the circumstances are such that they are breeding such outcomes. We are in environments and societies where trauma is a daily, basically, and the need for identity. We have not consciously been able to say these are the dynamics within which our children are learning or living, for that matter, because we send our children to schools as a hope for some kind of a breakthrough. Schools are an institute for improvement, for hope, better jobs. We all know why we have children there, but society is not doing much to help the environment and the spaces for children.
But where does society start? Doesn't society start at home? And aren't people across the spectrum of home right through to the school and other areas that we all interact in, aren't we all supposed to be responsible for the way children are raised and how they turn out? I
actually made a note on that, in that the parenting environment has become so stressed that parents are no longer able to provide their environment, an environment for nurturing children as it is. If children are not at, parents are not at work, they are going through unemployment. Our socio-economic situations are just dire on their own, and where there's addiction in communities like this, where you'd find that there's gangsterism as well. It's children wanting to belong in one way or the other with the absence of parents, because there's a need for attachment with the children's development. And where you have parents that are not necessarily able or available can do that. As it is, we are a developing state, as a country as well. There's a whole lot of errors that needs to be corrected consciously and deliberately. And what we find is that we're not consciously and actively doing that. In this case, you'd find there's the Department of Education, but there's also the Department of Social Development at SABC. So the issue may not necessarily be the prison setup, but it's how we support each other, because the very parents themselves that we can be blaming today are the ones that are going through unemployment, are going through a whole lot of issues that they're not able to cater for the children as they should be. And these, with gangsterism, it's a sense of belonging, usually, particularly for boys. They want to belong, they want to represent something. You'd find the setup is such that they are fatherless children as well, where there are fathers themselves are role modeling this behavior. So there's no conscious intervention to either help heal or enable people, children to develop properly and attach properly and be responsible, be empathetic, be sympathetic, basically.
Let me bring Steve in. Steve, these are very deep issues that Molebokgang is speaking to. I wouldn't expect us to be able to solve those in 2 minutes. But in the short term, what can the department be doing? Because this is one too many deaths that we're hearing about, children being stabbed outside school or in school. What can the department do in the short term? Can you ramp up some security? And longer term, do you think there needs to be more sensitivity around, you know, the kind of environment that our children are growing up in, and keeping a close tab on whether gangsters are developing in certain areas?
Yeah, maybe I need to start by saying I want to disagree with on the issue that we should have known that there's gangs that are operating in our schools. Gangsterism, it's incident driven. If those incidences are not happening at the school, like as I've already indicated, that the school has never received incidences where learners are fighting, and when we go deeper in terms of investigating, we realize that, look, probably there's a sense of gangsterism here, or they belong to a certain gang. It has never happened for many years. So how would a school or the department know about that? But we will encourage people, where there's some element of violence or gangs that are, you know, in operation, they need to report that to the school, so that we then have a program where we're going to make sure that we do away with those gangs, because we have prioritized your gangsterism, your substance abuse, your bullying. Those are the high priorities when coming to us attending to, and we have protocols on how to manage those cases when they are reported to us. So there's no way that we will just keep quiet and say, you know, it's life must just continue.
Yeah,
like that.
I understand that, Steve, but you know, the thing is, rather than being reactive, what measures can you put in place to try and prevent those situations arising? Because like you say, you can't actually foresee them.
Look, we'll overemphasize the inclusivity in terms of the cluster approach. Like as you said, we have our sister departments, social development, Department of Community Safety, which have an element of police that will be involved in trying to protect us, and you know, Department of Health. There's an element of sexual assault that are happening in our schools. We need to put an emphasis on education there. So then the parents cannot abdicate their parenting. Whether we do have situations that are in our space, but we need to make sure that a learner that we send to school, or that child, is a disciplined child, because we can't now, you know, invite challenges to the educators. Educators, I mean, they need to focus on what is happening in the classroom, and discipline should not be their headache. If one child, yes, there's some sense of being rebellious and ill-disciplined, then that they should be in a position to can, you know, attend, and you know, the SGB is there to administer, you know, discipline, and the code of conduct they are responsible for. Then they will be in a position to do that. But all other stakeholders, we need to work together. This is bigger than us. Yeah.
Steve and Lebu, we can't talk about this issue in just 8 minutes and find all the solutions. Thank you very much to both of you. That was Steve Mabona. He's Gauteng Education's MEC, spokesperson, pardon me, not MEC, and Molebokgang Rabetswa. She's from the Stru movement. We're going to go for a quick break.